How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to TheBlueShifting, and welcome back to Muv-Luv Monday, where we are continuing the, well, I'd call this depression phase of post-Yuuya's life, and the, attempt to see if we can kind of salvage the program while now that she's gone. Been really good, very emotional, very moving, interesting to see how it's all going to play out, but, I might seem a bit distracted today, and I'm going to tell you why. Because a little before I started streaming, we had a neighbor come by our place, and they had a little bit of a weird story. Apparently, a different neighbor down the road who's been known to be a little weird. Like, it's hard to explain. Erratic is the good word for it, I suppose. Just kind of making choices and then being very emotionally driven in such choices. I don't want to give too many details per se, but just say we've had some weird interactions. Not headbutting per se, but just weird decisions that they've made. I guess one good example was just how they kind of took it personally when we saw weird, like, traffic around the neighborhood, and we asked about it, and they decided to take it very emotionally, like, they took it as a personal insult that we would ask them questions about suspected stuff happening around their house, because they were just having very odd people who were kind of like wandering around our property, and we were just like wondering what was going on, and he took it personally. And then this morning, we had our neighbor come up and said, hey, we've had some weirdness going on, and they identified this neighbor, like the weird, quirky one, and they live just down the road from us. They happen to have a Tesla. And what's really interesting is they had this neighbor kind of walk down the road past them, said something really weird to them, like yesterday. And then this morning, like early in the morning, the same neighbor who was recognizable had put a mask on their face and was like snooping around their property, looking at their car, looking in the windows of their car and looking like around like through the windows of their house. And what's really strange is, like, it's not like this guy would be somebody who you would expect to be motivated by some kind of like a crime. Like, when you hear that kind of activity, you immediately think, oh, like that sounds like somebody who's looking for valuables, right? But this guy's easily the wealthiest person in our neighborhood. He owns a few different properties. Like, so he has his own property, and he owns a few others in the neighborhood that he rents out as Airbnbs or like to just like normal tenants. So, like, can't be like, and he like has his own like company, like he runs like a business and catering and stuff like that. Like, it's not like this is a person who has lack of assets. Now, granted, you can go on hard times, anybody can have that happen, but unlike most of us, he'd have things he can do to sell or to mitigate financial disaster, right? So then what would be his motivation for peeking in at people's like car and the windows of their home while wearing a mask that didn't do a great job of covering him up? And unfortunately, is not apparently aware that Tesla vehicles have built-in security systems that allow them to record movement outside of them, so you can review footage and thus get him captured. Not only putting like, and what's crazy is the idea that like this guy normally walks around the block with his dog, and so he was walking around the block. He walked around and it looks like he didn't see anything, because then he stopped, tied his dog to a nearby like lamppost, put on the mask, and then started snooping around the house, all captured on video. And so they came to us saying, hey, what should I do about this? Because this seems really weird, right? So we're like, okay, file a report, and let's just keep an eye on things. But, it's not a great thing to hear about your neighborhood. I'm lucky enough to live in a place where I don't have an HOA. I always figured, and like that's one of the biggest perks of the place that we ended up living. But now we gotta deal with a crazy neighbor who only moved in like 8 months ago, and yeah, that's just not great. So I'm gonna be kind of trying to keep my ear out, because first off, I don't want any shenanigans happening around our house. And secondly, that neighbor who was getting really nervous said that he might want to, like, we essentially offered to, like, that I would be home, and that if they got nervous or got concerned, they could reach out to me, and I could help. I could be a pair of eyes. I could help with, if we had to like confront the guy, I could be there to kind of be, for moral support, you could say. And I said yes. So I'm going to keep my ear out just in case, if I don't want to miss a knock on the door, or maybe a sound of somebody like messing around in our property. Just because, you know, I don't want to deal with that. So yeah, cool. Life and being an adult is so much fun. Yeah. They never tell you this kind of stuff when you're growing up. In fact, I remember my parents having to deal with like crazy neighbors, but I remember being just kind of like, whatever. But now when you're an adult, you're like, oh gosh, like what's gonna happen here? So yeah. Anyway, sorry about the TMI about real life stuff, but it's on my mind. I can't put it aside. But we're here to tell a good story, so let's jump right into it. Anyway, we are actually also starting the brand new year. Welcome to the new year. Hope you're excited. Not the best year start to mine, but I hope you're having a better start than I am. So anyway, let's just jump right into things, since, like I said, we kind of covered everything. Oh yeah, the other thing. The government approached Yuuya and asked him to essentially be a spy on the rest of Argus flight. We said no, but then it was revealed that the agent who was talking to us apparently has some, like, strong connection to our family, specifically our mom. So that's odd. That's really weird. Let's see how this all plays out then. All right, let's jump in. Anyone with a working pair of eyes can see this place as a microcosm for the world at large. The terrorists certainly knew. That's why we were a target.
Oh, Yuuya, 早かったな。悪い。ちょっと待っててくれるか?
Don't worry about it. Busy as always, I see. Wish he'd follow his own darn advice and stop pulling on all-nighters. Still, am I imagining things, or is work not progressing as quickly as it should? Lieutenant Sandek. I've seen the lieutenant here and there, but not a trace of Kriska or Inya. Wonder what's going on with them. It's been 5 days already. A double whammy of post-hypnotic suggestions and drugs. Both forms of therapy are in common use throughout the UN forces, not just the Soviet Union. Hell, I've used them myself to get back on track, and it's not like I can judge them for it. But using them for therapeutic processes is one thing. Using them as performance enhancers is a hell of another thing entirely. Just what the fetch are the Reds doing with Kriska and Inya? Oh, we actually gonna talk to him, or are we just gonna stare down him? Lieutenant Sandek has to know. Oh, buddy, he doesn't just know about that. He knows more. Oh, He knows what's being done to them. He knows where they are. Oh, we're just gonna run over to him, okay? Lieutenant Sandek, can I have a minute? Oh, Colonel Sandek. Excuse me, Captain Sandek. Yes, sir. Gosh darn it, this dude's so fetching intimidating. Always puts me on edge. I agree, dude. He's the definition of intimidation. Oh, I didn't even realize there were other people here. Yeah, I'm sure you're feeling super bad about that. Actually, here's the thing. I can't really hold that too harsh against him. It's awful. He should never have done it, and all that. But again, his priority is state secrets. Russia is first for him and always will be. I mean, Yuuya was very honorable, and I don't think she ever would have condoned, backdoor dealing, skullduggery, or, like that, like, especially to that degree. But I think Yuuya would have understood, like, the principle of, like, making sure that your people thrive as much as possible, that, like, you've got to do what it takes to make that happen. And whilst she obviously would disagree that he had to do what he did, I think she also would understand the motive and could relate to it. Doesn't mean it's justified, but it also means I can't just overtly hate him for putting a hit on her. And it's because it's fairly clear that he is barely keeping his own plan and his own nation together at this rate. And it's looking like things get even worse now, with his immediate superior not only looking likely to climb the ranks in the collapse of the current structure of the Soviet Union government, but that person has no issue at all with threatening Sandek or the people he cares about to get things done. Anyway, So that's my spiel on Sandek. I hate what he did, but I also can't, like, you can't look at this guy and say he's a villain. He's certainly bad, and he's willing to do some pretty incomprehensibly terrible things in the name of serving his nation, but unlike other people who can be displayed as just being pure evil, I can't say he is. Thank you, sir.
高村中尉は我が祖国と帝国の架け橋になってもらえる人物と考えていただけに無念だ。国として目指すところは違えども、共に研鑽し共に戦った仲間として通責の念に耐えない。
That's the thing. I genuinely think he's right. I think he's telling the truth here. Even though he is kind of like the hand that ordered it, I think he deeply regrets it. He feels like there was no other choice given what she knew about his secret program that, like, I think is so secret even some of his superiors probably don't even know about what he's actually doing. He just couldn't risk it, which is just super unfortunate.
また中尉は祖国旧国の英雄でもある。しかるべき後に正式に哀悼の意が捧げられるであろう。
Sir, as one of the lieutenant's subordinates, allow me to express my thanks.
ドール中尉のことも聞いている。貴様たちもいろいろと辛い立場だろう。だがよくやっている。頑張りたまえ。
Thank you very much.
ところで何か用件があったようだが。
Yes, sir. I wish to ask you about Lieutenant Barchanoa and Sanisa's condition. Are they well?
その件か。なるほど、気にかかるところであろうな。だが残念ながら今は自分が悪い。テロリストの脅威が未だ去りきらぬ中、国家機密に属する情報を明らかにすることはできない。
Gosh darn, I keep hitting the microphone. Okay, move away a bit. There we go. Okay, so it's still a state secret. I kind of get that. That makes sense.
祖国旧国に大いなる尽力を果たした少尉には恩義をもって報いたいところだが、理解してほしい。
Yes.
そう心配せずとも、いずれわかる。少尉は少尉のなすべきを果たせばよかろう。
It's something. No cause for concern. So isn't the implication there that Kriska and Inya are safe and sound? He's like, well, either that or he's telling you to don't ask questions. Thank you very much.
Yuuya, どうした?何かいいことでもあったのか?
Huh? Nothing in particular. Why? Enough about me. What are you doing here?
見たか。サンダーク大尉と話していた英士。
Oh, you. He's the scared guy who did delete the data.
ブリッジス少尉だ。どうだ?何か感じるか?
Oh, this is Kriska.
特に何も。
そうか。
ユーヤ。ブリッジス。
They've erased her again. Maybe that's how the trick is. The trick of the thing is like to do what would normally be irreversible, irreparable, like brain like remapping during these like incidents to turn them into killing machines, but it would normally like destroy their psyche. But then part of the trick is that they then revert their psyche to a previous like almost like a save state for a human. And that's the way they can make them reusable, turn them into these like machines that can go full insanity mode, literally breaking their own souls and bodies, but then they can reset them so they can be used again. It's a horrific abuse of like human will and the nature of like a person, but the idea would mean that you could take pilots, put them in situations and push them to the absolute limit and then recover them essentially that might be the second phase or the second layer to like the program. And the way that you could expand this program beyond just Kriska and Inya. Kriska and Inya being able to work together to become like an insane killing machine is almost like the flagship, the proof of concept. And while other surface pilots can't directly benefit because they can't share like the Alternative 3 psychic linking that allows Kriska and Inya to fly like they do, you could push the idea of turning your soldiers into temporary super soldiers and then resetting them after battles. The downside, I think, to that would be that they then wouldn't remember any potential lessons that they learned during that fight. But again, that could just mean that this is something they trigger only in like extreme circumstances when they need success over the chance of potentially recovering the pilot. But then you can recover the pilot, reset them, and you can kind of get back that good pilot. That's an interesting concept. It's very much looking at people as numbers, not as people, but there's a lot of merit to the idea if you're thinking pure survival. Anyway, so you haven't taken a look at my report yet, huh?
悪い。正直、94セカンドをぶっ壊れる前の状態に戻すだけでも大幅に遅れそうなんだ。
Why? But you guys are pulling out constant all-nighters, aren't you?
それがどうにも効率が上がらなくて。
What's the problem?
こういう状況になって勝手が変わった上に、イブラヒムの旦那もユイ姫もハイネマンさんもいない。いろんなところで影響が出てる。
Yeah. With Yui dead, Ibrahim being detained at perpetuity, and then I guess Hyman being gone, which I guess it makes sense he's like busy, but at the same time you think he'd be here. But now with all three of them gone, it's like there's no one to rudder the ship, really. There's like we can send out people to ask, but like the highest authority that we have probably can't trump the authority of people we're asking for resources, and they're going to be having a million other things they're begging for resources.
資材の調達一つとってもそうだし、何よりトップがいないこと自体がどうしてもストレスになってるんだろうな。
Yeah.
あと整備兵ってのは基本的にコマンドに従って動くタイプのスペシャリストだから、全体をなかなか俯瞰できないとか。本来ならそれをやるはずの俺や整備班長にも細かな作業が集中しすぎてそれどころじゃないとか。
It's interesting. This is a great case type for why managers are necessary. It's this idea of like there's a different skill set and a mindset that you need to break down an entire project and then divvy it out its little parts to try and keep the whole thing cohesive. There is merit to managers who are hired who are specifically good at that talent. I think we struggle in our current system where too many people become managers because it seems as a level of prestige, and so there's too many managers. Those managers aren't trained to actually be managers, rather than they're just kind of charismatic leaders of like their subordinates. So like there's a lot of like red tape and bogged down bureaucratic like stuff that gets wrapped up in a lot of businesses. But in principle, it is an important thing to have.
生知識が高い分ちょっとしたことで揉めるとか。ま、言い訳だが、そういうことかな。
So you say, but the Soviet Union is the Third United Front, almost ready to resume trials, you know? What's wrong with the Strike Eagles and the Active Eagles?
あっちはいつでも動かせる。けど、許可が下りない。
Gosh darn it, we don't even have that? Can't even practice? Isn't there something you can do? Nah, fetch it. I'll go see Heinemann myself and fill him in.
それはいいが、直接話すのは無理だぞ。
Why?
手が離せないって言われて、受付から先には進めない。その書類も多分そこで預かられるだけだ。
Fetch. I still have to try.
それは止めねえよ。けど、94セカンドは今のままで組み直す。そうしないと、本当にいつ治るかわからないんだ。
That's fair. Crap, that doesn't bode well for the XFJ program.
その心配をするなら、94セカンドの修理を完了することこそが最善だよ。修理がしっかり終わっているのと、まだ動きもしない傷だらけの機体がそこにあるのと、お偉いさんの印象はどっちがマシか想像してみてくれ。
Yep. You have a point.
遅れるっつっても、通常の日程よりはだいぶ短縮できるから、それは誤解しないでくれ。想定通りにはいかないけど、しっかりやってるからさ。
Sounds good. I always think that's one of those interesting things where, like, I grew up watching Star Trek, and it's always funny because, like, a dramatic thing they tend to do in any sci-fi or any series, like I'd say something like Red October would count too. We have engineering working on, like, the mechanics of a ship and the captain making a demand, but, like, how soon can we have X done? And they're like, I don't know, it's going to take me, like, 6 hours. And it's like, make it 2. And it's like, And it makes for a dramatic moment, and then they usually pull a clutch and they win. It's great. But in Voyager, if I recall correctly, the Star Trek Voyager, that is one of my favorite series of all time, they actually kind of address that as a concept, where the captain says like, "Hey, I need how soon can you have this repaired?" And she's and B'Elanna's like, 2 days, and the captain's like, "We don't have 2 days. You need to do it much sooner than that." She's like, "Look, I can only work so fast. There's stuff that has to get done. I can't just arbitrarily throw out a day and make it work then." And she's like, "Well, what would you have to do?" And they kept talking about how well, if I shorten the time, my estimate is given if I have enough materials, enough personnel, and we make time for safety checks to be able to make sure that we don't explode when we try and do whatever we're fixing. And so it's either if you want it faster, either I have to pull people from other projects, we have to get more materials that we have access to, or we have to bypass safety protocol, which is usually what happens. Is of those three, which one's the easiest to do is bypass safety. But you know what's also the most dangerous thing to do? Bypass safety. So that's kind of the idea, is that here is these guys are working their butts off. But if they try to work too fast, they're gonna have to sacrifice. Either they're gonna have to pull way more personnel, pushing them much harder than they deserve, and that can lead to mistakes. You either have to have access to extra resources that you normally wouldn't have access to, which requires management that can really negotiate on your behalf, or maybe pull some strings and favors that you've built up over working over a long period of time, or bypass safety checks and risk the entire project going kaflooey over a little extra time. It's really challenging. Vincent and the guys have been burning the midnight oil to keep up with the deadlines and have the sheer new second up and running ASAP. I wish progress were quicker, but I have no right to complain. Alright, I'll shelve my proposal for the moment to go back to the drawing board, but when you're done with repairs, you're coming with me to turn it in. Vincent's the best. Fetch! What the heck's holding up with command? A police interrogation to last for days? Crap's ridiculous. And what the fetch is wrong with Heinemann? The son of a bee is supposed to be the gosh darn technical supervisor. Well, that's the thing. He's a supervisor. He actually has full-time jobs as well. Does he even care what happens to the Shiranui second? And Yuuya is suffering. Yuuya's suffering from a lot of people in his position do. He's specialized, he's great at what he does, he's got his eyes set on the prize, and that's excellent. But he doesn't see the full picture. He struggles to. And so when his immediate needs and concerns are being met, he gets really frustrated. But the problem is, I can guarantee you, especially from the quality of writing we're seeing, there's a very good reason why Heinemann's not giving this priority one. Alright.
いい香りだ。気が安らぐよ。
昨日届いたコロンビア産です。物流の回復状況は当初の想定を上回っています。大佐は実業家でも成功できそうですね。
Hey, a good manager, essentially a good businessman, kind of the same thing in a lot of ways. The skill sets are pretty much identical. It's part of why managers are often in businesses, but you need them in military as well.
私はただ誠実に話をしただけだよ。たまたまうまく調整できるだけの材料があっただけだ。
その材料を作り出し、飲ませるための試作工作。大佐だからこそ可能だったと考えますが。
光栄だがね、上には上がいるものだよ。
アメリカが G 弾運用を基本戦略として以来、戦術機不要論が体制を占めるとはいえ、それに不満を持つ企業も多い。大佐はその感激を縫うように交渉を進めたのですよね。
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting idea that the US, because they're oh, G-bombs are the perfect solution. So why are we focusing so much on TSS? And he's no. And then he talked to the business people who are designing TSS and said, hey, you could work for us and get maybe more footing with the UN rather than just the US.
欧州連合の腐った官僚たちより、大佐の方がずっと頼りになりますわ。彼らに任せていたら、きっと計画は頓挫したに違いありません。あんな不審しか考えられない連中に、大胆な提案なんてできるわけないですから。
やれやれ。相変わらず手厳しいな。
それだけ、今回のテロ関連の事後処理は、難しい問題だったということです。アメリカとソ連は、テロの事後処理に奔走しています。 あれだけのことが暴露されたわけですし、当面は対応に時間を取らざるを得ないかと。
Yeah, unfortunately, you're never going to get that genie back in the bottle. You have to change the bottles. Like, you have to kind of build a new narrative, essentially. And that's why it's going to be very problematic.
今回のテロは、プロミネンス計画にとって最大の危機だったと考えています。
なぜかね。
米ソ両国が計画への参加凍結。最悪は撤退という選択があり得る状況だったこと。このいずれかとなれば、多かれ少なかれ、参加各国も撤退するであろうこと。以上2点が理由です。
Participation in the project, maybe. But the other angle I'm going to say with this is the fact that, like, while project prominence might not seem very prominent right now, it also was showing so many signs and symptoms of success. It could actually also become the thing that the Soviets and the United States actually cling to help save face. Because a project like this rising from the ashes of the terrorist attack and showing and showcasing the effectiveness and the, like, success despite the challenges could be what saves a lot of these people in power's, like, you know, positions. To show that they were doing the right things, like they were making the right calls, and even if they made one mistake or two mistakes, like you can make up for it by making right calls in other areas, and so like they could see it as a way of branching out as well. And it just depends on, you might have to sell it to them that way, but they could see it that way.
果たして米ソがそのような決断をするかね。
いえ、通常はまずありえません。プロミネンス計画参加国には多国間技術交流という目的はあるものの、実態は米ソの技術を入手するという一点であると言っても過言ではありません。すなわち、両国にとってここはマーケットですから、そう簡単に撤退はしないでしょう。
Yes.
特に本計画に大きなアドバンテージを持ち、リスクも少ないアメリカは、少なくともソ連より先に手を引く理由がありません。
Yeah, so I guess the real threat here is the Soviet Union shakes up leadership, new leadership decides that they want nothing to do with the United States after this. So, even if it would be like a kind of a poor choice economically and even politically to pull out of it at this point, it might be a short-term loss for the long-term gain in the eyes of the more radicalized leaders that are likely getting put in position.
しかし、よりにもよって暴露されたのが、レッドシフトなる密約だったことが想定外です。これにより、両国政府は基盤の立て直しを余儀なくされた。ソ連は、反初期長派が勢力を増し、米国も世論頼みだったところがあります。
Yeah, that makes sense.
マスコミを使ってうまく操作しているようですが、当初、アメリカの主だったメディアは、軒並み人道的見地からの政府非難ばかりでした。もっとも、そのような操作はいつまでも続きませんので、せいぜい1年以内に大衆を扇動できるかどうかが勝負の分かれ目でしょうが。
Yeah.
とにかく、これらのことに鑑みると、これまでとは比較にならないほど大きな可能性として、凍結、撤退はあり得た。
Interesting.
私はそう思います。
I guess that's another idea as well, is this idea of kind of, you can shape narratives only so far, eventually things might like kind of like leak out or information, but if you can draw out like the initial uproar and get distracted again, you can kind of dissipate the anger. So even just stretching it out like that could be enough.
なるほど、興味深い話だが、私とは見解が異なるようだ。
Really?
私はこのテロの影響をそこまで深刻に考えていないよ。
So he thinks, or is offering the opinion that like, well, the attack was more destructive itself than the actual effects of the attack.
ええ、その通りですわ。大佐だから深刻ではないのです。私が述べたのは、大佐以外の人間が本計画の指揮を取っていた場合の可能性ですわ。
Boy, she is simping hard.
この情勢下で、プロミネンス計画参加に利ありと、なおも米ソ両国に思わせることができるのは、大佐だけだと思います。我々、国連軍欧州派閥にとって、プロミネンス計画とは、絶対に存続させねばならない案件です。大陸が、第5計画支持のアメリカにとっては、あくまでも保険であり、副次的な計画でしかありません。 大佐はプロミネンス計画をお一人で守り抜かれた。
Interesting,
心
yeah.
より敬服いたします。
For every nation and every other country that wants to retake land rather than just leave it like at all, they need to have TSFs become more effective, become more like sustainable, get them to next gen levels as cheaply as possible. It's all kind of like about retaking land, taking back and destroying hives. But America's Alternative 5 just wants to wipe the board clean, literally, and turn the planet into a 90% ocean world instead of a 70%. Unfortunately, we know how that goes, but they don't know that yet.
別に魔法を使った覚えはないがね。交渉ごとにおいては、誠実さが最も能弁だと私は思っているよ。
正確には、誠実だと言い訳できることが、ですよね。
やれやれ。私の秘書殿はひねくれた者の見方を覚えてしまったようだ。
これも大佐の教育の賜物ですわ。
She's kind of adorable, you gotta admit.
人のせいにしないでくれたまえよ。すまんが、もう一杯もらえるかね。
はい、ただいま。大佐、私から質問をしてもよろしいですか？
構わんよ。
国際世論では、レッドシフト解体が声高に唱えられているにもかかわらず、当のソ連政府が抗議しない。この見返りとして、彼らはアメリカから何を受け取ったのでしょうか？
Ah. They must have made a trade, a serious trade, but maybe seeing the desperate state of the Soviet Union, they likely leveraged an immediate need for a long-term disadvantage.
その答えは、君は何だと思うかねで良いのかな？
そんな。
勉強熱心な君のことだ。君なりの答えは当然持っているだろう。できれば、私はそれが聞きたいね。
My initial thought is like the kind of essentially like super sovereign state of Alaska. Like we essentially gave them Alaskan territory to let them have a kind of offshore hub, because the Soviets still control a small portion of their original land and the continent, but like most of their citizenry have moved over to Alaska. I would immediately assume was the price, but I don't think that's the case. I imagine that was already like kind of an institution before that deal. So what would the Soviets have been so desperate to get that they'd be willing to potentially sacrifice their entire nation secretly in order to achieve? Well, I could imagine on one hand, it could be simple technology. The other thing is they might have needed G elements for some of their more experimental divisions, because that G elements is really intense, and I think that America has fairly clearly secured the majority, if not almost an entire stakeholding of G element currently. So maybe Russia used the negotiation as a tactic to gain access to that so they could develop specialized weapons, and maybe are now using it as part of the capitalization of the Alternative 3 program. That'd be my guess. G elements?
それでは、私はアメリカが差し出したものは、フランク・ハイネマン氏の持つ戦術機開発ノウハウであろうと考えています。
Oh, that would explain Heinemann's like connection to the Soviets.
ほう。
戦術機開発史上、最も稀有な才能を持ち、常にヘッドハンティングの対象であり続けた男。ハイネマン氏のソ連機回収協力。アメリカにとっては、すでに不要となりかけた技術でも、現在のボーニング社最高の商品である、彼の技術指導を受けられるとなれば、ソ連には十分妥協に見合う取引になると考えます。
Interesting. Because the US doesn't consider TSF development their ace in the hole anymore, they're willing to share or even give up like key assets in that regard because they believe that they're going to be essentially obsolete soon anyway.
これはまた想定外の話が飛び出してきたものだ。
そうでもないと思いますが、もっともこれには例の噂が事実であったという前提が必要なのですが、私は間違いないと思っています。
What's that?
例の噂、それは 彼が意図的にトムキャットの技術をソ連に流出させたという話かね。
Oh, interesting.
正確にはアメリカが彼を使って意図的に流したです。いずれにせよ、ジュラーブリックとトムキャットの類似性は偶然と片付けるにはあまりに不自然です。
Interesting. Because there's an interesting idea about like control of information and technology, where like obviously if you have essentially patented and secreted technological developments in your cutting edge machinery, you have an advantage. But you could also argue that you can hold that advantage for a while, and then maybe when you're on the cusp of developing new technology to kind of supersede it, but you haven't like come out with it yet, that might be the opportune time to then leak that information out. Because what do you gain by leaking information out? Like in the real world, I would argue is the same thing that has actually happened with fighter jet technology. Well, if you have had the time to not only like cultivate this technology but perfect it, and then you leak it out, you already have in your hands all the keys necessary to counter it. You know essentially how to best work against your own technology. So then you leak it to your like maybe not enemies is the right word, but your, you know, competitors. They greedily take it up, often taking very harsh deals, you know, losing lots of money, resources, influence, and other things in order to get access to the secret technology. And in return, you then kind of are guiding their own technological military development in the paths that you have chosen. In fact, it's actually a very similar tactic if you've played like the Mass Effect games. The whole concept of how the Reapers worked so effectively is that they left behind the technology for the jump gates. You know, the mass relays, which allowed people to quickly jump faster than light between different stars. By having these seeded out, it essentially laid the groundwork so that future rounds of developing intelligent species would essentially all realign all their technological foundations and technology along the lines that the Reapers understood thoroughly, and thus could easily be disrupted, taken over, and dismantled. The Reapers understood exactly how people traveled between the stars because they used the technology that the Reapers had essentially been a part of developing. So when the Reapers came and launched a war against the galaxy, no one had any advantage at all against the Reapers because the Reapers had essentially counters for everything, the technology that they would develop. Now, obviously, they might have little quirks that they develop or little things that might be unique to their species, but they still fall in line with the technology that the Reapers understood and thus always had an advantage. Similar concept. If you leak this data about how to build these fighter jets or these fighter TSFs, then your competitors will base the technology around their next generation of fighters around this technology, which is clearly effective, but in turn that shoehorns a lot of the technological development in the direction that the creator of that technology wants, because it gives them the advantage of being able to kind of work out even the changes that are made in development in other nations are often predictable and adaptable to work with if you understand the underlying technology to the core. And then, surprise, surprise, after the technology leaks and the next line of these fighters are released, that's when you then release your new cutting-edge fighter, which not only has new technology, but has ways of countering the very technology that you kind of baked into the last generation, that then happens to be the foundation for all the technology that's used in fighters for everyone else. Thus, you control the narrative without feeling like you have to, and in fact, they're grateful for you doing so. It's actually really interesting, forward control thinking.
外観のみならず、フレームやレイアウトまで類似しているとなると、姉妹機は言い過ぎでも、親戚ぐらいの関係と言っても良いかと。
しかしトムキャットは、当時世界最強と謳われていた最新鋭機だ。その技術の漏洩をアメリカが見逃す、もしくは先導するものかね。
Like I said, it's about controlling that narrative. It's about controlling the information because then you can use it to your advantage. The only way it's bad is if it leaks when you're not ready for it. when you don't have a means of countering your own technology. As soon as you're ready for it, even though you'd never say that, then you could allow the leak.
アメリカはソ連に盾になってもらう必要があったのです。ベータの侵攻によってソ連が撤退に次ぐ撤退を余儀なくされ、東側勢力の弱体化が顕著になることは、アメリカにとって非常に具合が悪いことでした。
Yeah. As a shield, you want your shield to be at least somewhat effective.
冷戦の末期、ベータ侵攻によるソ連、中国の弱体化は、神の見業と称えたタカ派もいたようですが、愚鈍と評しても良いでしょう。
Yeah, no, that would have, man, that is short-sighted.
アメリカ国防省内のものの見える人間は、ベーリング海峡を挟んで、ソ連とアメリカは隣国であることを理解していました。ソ連が消滅すれば、次に矢面に立つのはアメリカです。そしてその時は、着実に近づいていた。ですが、表立ってソ連に手を差し伸べるわけにはいきません。なぜなら、アラスカ租借の話が進行中であり、さらにソ連に利する提案はできなかった。
That's another angle I hadn't thought about, the idea that, they don't want the nation to fall, because once you fall, you lose your buffer state, and you need the buffer state.
共産審判のレッテルを貼られることは、大統領にとって、決して負うことのできないリスクでした。そこで国防省は、非公式に、ハイネマン氏に技術漏洩の指示をしたというわけです。
それは妙だな。軍事機密の流出は重大だ。アメリカは偉大な天才を失うことになりかねないが。
Again, I think they were ready to lose the technology.
そこがアメリカ人の面白いところだと思うのですが、アメリカには、ハイネマン氏を処断することは不可能です。
That's also fair. He's fairly untouchable.
なぜかね。
ハイネマン氏は真の天才だからです。戦術機の機体構造デザイン、材料工学から手記設計まで、彼は各分野の突出したスペシャリストでありながら、本質的にはゼネラリストなのです。一人で戦術機を完成させることができる唯一の男。そう呼ばれるアメリカが生んだ人類の至宝。このような人物をアメリカは決して切り捨てません。彼のもたらした情報は、ソ連の戦術機開発能力を飛躍的に向上させました。スフォーニ開発局は、ミクヤム・グルビッチ設計局を出し抜くことに成功し、アメリカは強力な盾を得た。
Yeah, okay.
ソ連は、当然アメリカの思惑に気づいていたでしょうが、乗らざるを得ない状況だったと思われます。
Which unfortunately, politically, is what makes the most sense. It's why America is often, criticized for essentially bullying other nations. It's because to give ourselves the best advantage possible, we literally kind of weaponize other nations to carry on battles and fronts that we don't want to bother with. Which is sad, but it's the state of reality, and it's the state of reality for any powerful nation. If America were unseated and some other power takes its place, history says that'll happen eventually. I'm sure it will. When that happens, though, any atrocities or any things you have against the United States and the policy and the things that they've done and the movements they've supported or not supported or undercut, whatever nation takes a place, it can do the exact same thing. It's all about maintaining power, and it sucks, and it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And unless there's a paradigm shift in humanity where we can start being better than we are, it's just going to be an inevitability. That there's going to be backhand deals, there's going to be undercutting of principles in the name of security for the top people. And it sucks, but it's kind of what reality is, because people are people, and we're very flawed.
そして今、再びハイネマン氏がソ連に非公式で協力する。ジュラーブリクの系統であるビエールクトの開発に携わるという流れは、私には十分あり得るのですが。いえ、ビエールクトのみならず、ジュラーブリクへの強化モジュール追加。もしくは、ハイネマン氏がまた手をつけていないミグ系戦術機の強化という可能性もあります。
Right.
これは、ソ連にとって、レッドシフトを維持してでも手に入れたいものではないでしょうか。ソ連中央執行部において、レッドシフト問題が戦争の道具として使われることはあるでしょうが、拒もうが拒むまいが、現実として彼らの居場所はアラスカのみです。アメリカも、レッドシフトが公になったことで、それは事実上封印されたようなものですし、ソ連にはそれほど大きなリスクはないように思われます。
Interesting. So it's being hushed over. I feel like that wouldn't work though. Like, how can you keep that kind of story contained?
最後に、私はこの仲介をしたのが大佐なのだと確信しております。
Interesting.
以上です。
いやー、実に面白い話だった。さすがだな。
Yeah.
一点、私を買いかぶりすぎているところを除けばだがね。
Hartwick is a powerful, charismatic, and very motivated leader. But he's still just a colonel. He can only have so much outreach in his current position.
では、今の仮説は不正解ということでしょうか。
さてな。その答えは、君自身で見つけてみてはどうかな。君が私に幻滅でもしない限り、私には君にやってもらいたいことがまだまだあるからね。
Fair.
幻滅などありえません。では、答えを見つけられるよう努力いたします。
では、早速だが、もう一杯もらおうか。
How much coffee you drinking?
はい。
総員の所定位置到達を確認。ロック解除。ガントリー解放。
Alright.
ロック解除。ガントリー解放。
コマンドポストより、イーダル1。ガントリー解放は継続中。解放後は誘導員の指示に従い、規定位置まで移動せよ。
Alright, they're sending it out to chest run, huh?
イーダル1、まもなく第一滑走路に入ります。コマンドポストよりイーダル1、カタパルト接続準備。
They're not talking. Oh, look at that terrifying thing.
コマンドポストよりイーダル1、テスト終了。直ちに起動せよ。
That thing looks like a killing machine. Look at that sucker. Holy crap, that paint job is amazing.
機体点検の後、プラン B の試験を開始せよ。
わかった。
期待している。試験開始前には戻る。
The Burkhardt went out for testing? Seriously?
ゆうや遅いぞ。もう帰ってきちまったよ。
Crap, we're the only ones falling behind.
ビエルクとか、なかなか良さそうな機体だな。
そっかな。なんかもう、典型的な悪役って感じだけどな。
It looks awesome. How the heck can they be goofing off at a time like this? We gotta get our backs against the wall for fetch's sake. Sure, we can go through the rough patches lately, but the fact remains the commies have an operational TSF and we don't. Hey, who's piloting that?
さてな。残念だが、誰も見てないぜ。
Ew.
もうすぐ降りてくるだろう。
This might be interesting. TSF might be fully functional, but Kriska and Inya were in no shape to fly last time I saw them. And Captain Sandek told me I shouldn't worry.
お、ご会長だ。
It is Kriska. Yep.
ま、当然といや当然だな。
Thank gosh she's okay. Flying the Burkhardt must have taken quite a toll on her, but she seems fit enough to handle the ride, and that's a load off my mind.
あの野郎。顔見たら怒りがこみ上げてきたぜ。よくも私の二番機を。ってあれあのチビがいね。
Yeah, where is Inya? She's right, there's no sign of Inya anywhere. Maybe she's essentially become part of the machine. Not in a literal sense, but maybe she's like hooked up to like machinery inside it, and she's just kind of lives in there now. Maybe she's in the hospital? Well, it's been a whole week already. Inya did almost OD on drugs and post-hypnotic suggestions. It's not unthinkable for her to be still feeling the side effects. She's gonna need plenty of rest even after she regains consciousness. Doubt she'll fly a TSF anytime soon. So that explains why Kriska is looking so down in the dumps. She's so attached to Inya, it's hard to think she's not feeling a lot of that pain herself. Like she's walking around as half a person. Still, hope those tests went well. Kriska had her share of issues in the past, and her confidence issues resurfacing at a time when she's not on top form could spell disaster. Sucks I can't be there to lend her an ear. I'll have to trust that she's strong enough to deal with her own issues herself.
確かあのチビ、最後は意識を失ったんだっけ？
She did.
あれから1週間か。
I don't think there's anything to worry about. Captain Sandek told me as much.
バカじゃねえの？私があいつらのこと心配するか？それはおめえだろ！
ユウヤ。
Sure, sure. Oh.
アルゴス試験小隊に伝達。アルゴス試験小隊は14002 C108 ブリーフィングルームに集合せよ。繰り返す。アルゴス試験小隊は14002 C108 ブリーフィングルームに集合せよ。
That doesn't sound good.
なんだ？よーステラ、一体何が始まるんだ？
さあ、私にもわからないわ。
あれ、ニーラムちゃんがいねえな。おー、呼び出した本人が遅刻とは、どういう。
Hey!
隊長
He's back!
敬礼。
Yes, sir.
本日より部隊に復帰する。皆には心配をかけてね。
Thank goodness. I hope you're alright.
よかった。疑いは晴れたんですね。
当たり前だろ。隊長がテロに加担するわけねえんだよ。
私が留守中の状況については、ラーヌランド軍曹、ブレーメル少尉から説明を受けた。
I bet you have.
だいぶ苦労をしているようだな。
Understatement of the century.
そりゃ、やっぱり隊長がいないと。
Hey, it's not his fault. He would have been here if he could be.
貴様たちにとって XFJ 計画とは、世界各国の最前線からよりすぐられた兵士。優秀であったがゆえに、後方の開発部隊に派遣された兵士。貴様たちは、遠い空の下で命を懸ける仲間たちに、誓った思いを忘れたのか？平和を謳歌しすぎて、それが世界の当たり前だとでも思い込んだか？
They need it. They need this. It's a kick in the pants for all of them. They've been kind of... I mean, granted, they probably needed the time to recover, but they need to be in gear now.
この基地がテロの標的となり、向こうの民が数千人規模で犠牲になった。それを見せられてもなお、目が覚めないのか？ XFJ 計画の遅延は、そのまま日本帝国の負担に直結する。そんな低たらくで、高村中尉に顔向けできるのか？アルコス試験小隊は、この基地で唯一の多国籍部隊だ。それを知らぬわけではあるまい。
That's true. We kind of need to be very... We need to set an example.
我々の団結がまやかしでないのなら、XFJ 計画の推進は、自国を救うのと同じであり、決して他人事などではないはずだ。
Right.
もちろんそれはそう思ってますよ。
けどなんだ。ソ連はすでに試験を再開した。統一中華戦線も明日には再開するということだ。我が隊は機体の損傷が激しいから遅れを取っても仕方ないというのか。貴重なガントリーを占有してかかしのように突っ立っているアクティブイーグル。あれはなんだ？ジア講座所。
それは試験の許可が。
首相なことだな。こういう時だけおとなしいとはどういうことだ。命令や許可がなければ何もできない。寝言を言うな。
He's kind of got a point. I mean, like, yeah, obviously getting authorization is preferable, but when there's no one to give authorization, you can take the initiative. It's a bit of a gamble, but, like, I don't think anyone would have complained.
貴様らがそんな玉か。命令を都合のいいように解釈し、上官を悩ませてきたくせに、もっとマシな言い訳はないのか。なあ、ブリッジス少尉、相変わらず貴様は自分のことだけか。ん？お得意の理にかなった命令違反ってやつをどうして教えてやらん。
Yeah, again, kind of got a point there.
それで
Still.
も貴様は今回のことで随分と成長したな。チェルミナートルを倒したことで、あのスカーレットツインに肩を並べるだけの英士になったと言えよう。その腕が鈍ってもいいのか？何度でも試したくはないのか？高村中尉が死んだら、超刀を使った近接格闘への熱も冷めたか？
God, it's so harsh, but it's so true. Fetch me.
死人に足を引っ張られるとは、所詮はアメリカのお坊ちゃんめ。修羅場に体制がないと見える。
Alright, that's a little far, but I get what he's trying to do, but still.
まったく。高村千代も悪い時に死んだものだ。貴様にはそれを克服するだけの力は、まるで
What?
腕は上がっても心が未熟だ。優れた英士になりたければ、注意のことなどさっさと忘れて鍛錬しろ。それが一番の供養となるだろう。
Tell him he's wrong! Cut the bullcrap! Uh-oh. You are being a child, sir.
貴様は何に腹を立てているんだ。貴様は優れた英士として一歩成長した。そしてさらに成長するために必要な課題も明らかになった。どこに不満がある？貴様の踏み台になるのなら、高村千代も本望だろう。
Fetch me. That's...
貴様がどこに向かい、何に寄っているのか、私にはわからない。それは私が求めているのは、計画遂行のために必要な、貴様にしかない能力を適切に提供すること。最低限それだけだ。貴様そのものを理解してほしければ、そのように振る舞え。他人に理解を押し付けるな。わかったか？
He's right. And the idea too is like, it's cool that he was trying to think of ideas and different changes that could be made to the program and to the TSF, but at the same time, it also isn't the right time for it. He should have been putting his energy into other things. And that's what Dogulu is trying to help him understand. They're trying to snap him back and be like, look, go in the right direction here. It's good. They need it. And sometimes the leader has to become the bad guy to help people snap together.
皆にも言っておく。もっともらしい言い訳で自分を納得させて、目的が達成されるのかどうか。普段の貴様たちであれば、考えるまでもなく答えが出るだろう。焦りは視野を狭める。つまらんことに足並みは揃えなくていい。隊としての結束を今こそ示せ。以上だ。解散。
Oh boy.
敬礼。
Come on, just take it and just grow up, man.
なんつうか、さすがは旦那っつうか。
ガツンとぶん殴られた気分だね。
ええ。いちいちもっともで、反論の余地もないわ。
Exactly, unfortunately.
みっともねえ言い訳しちまったよ。
We've been acting like children. Talking a big game about needing to move forward while spinning our wheels in place.
Yuuya, 大丈夫か？
Yeah.
隊長は、あれでユーヤのことを認めてるんだよ。
Yeah, I know that. Doesn't make it fun! Alright. And on this moment of reflection, we're going to be ending it here. So by the way, I'm not sure if you were able to pick up on it. There was kind of a hard cut that happened around towards the end there. Bonus points if you noticed it. Hopefully not, because if I'm decent at my editing, it shouldn't be very apparent. But just a quick addendum to the drama of the before the recording. I got a phone call and kind of got some updates on stuff. And so yeah, so creepy neighbor that was kind of predatoring around like our friend neighbors around their Tesla and such. Yeah, it wasn't just a mask he put on, it was a ski mask. Like the kind of mask that people will use to try and obscure their face completely, and often is like similar to something you put on like for crimes or whatever. And it's not the first time. So the friends of ours that are being harassed essentially, because it's been a pattern of harassment, it feels, and they're Filipino by descent. This guy, for some reason, singled them out and just kind of been kind of rough with them. And like the thing is, like they got kids, and like he drives around this big truck, and I guess like apparently like one of the parents saw him in his truck when their kids were playing outside, and like he swerved his truck towards their kids a little bit, Like, obviously more to like scare them than to actually do anything, but like it's seeming like a pattern of potential harassment. But it seems like, in my opinion, he's probably just dancing right on the edge of where you might be able to do anything about it legally. Still, I'm hoping and encouraging our neighbors to like, hey, we'll support you, and hopefully they'll put in a report, because if something actually does happen, having a backlog of like incident reports could be very helpful. But in the moment, it just makes like living in the neighborhood for this family really like rough, and that sucks. So yeah, not a fun addendum. And honestly, I don't share much of my personal life. It's just, it's so heated, it's on my mind, and it's like, it's just about people being crappy to other people, you know? And ironically, or not ironically, it's actually a common topic that's been covering up in Muv-Luv, and this one in particular. It's about like refugees, and about like some people like living high and mighty and seeing others as lower than them, trying to weaponize people against each other, trying to intimidate people into conforming into certain attitudes or to accepting demands. It's just rough, and it's sad to see a microcosm of the very similar like aspects that we're covering in a story like Muv-Luv in my real life, and I think it's good to call it out. When it comes to real people and actual calling out, it's difficult, because like these are neighbors, these are people we live around. It has to be done very carefully, very like proactively, and very like pragmatically, so that, you know, we don't overstep our bounds, we don't make enemies when there can be no recourse, and that, you know, like things are done in a proper, fair way where both sides get a chance to voice their concerns. Even if it seems pretty cut and dry from my perspective, there could be like misunderstandings, there could be a breakdown of like communication, or there just could be more levels and layers to the story like this that I don't have any awareness of. So yeah, we'll just have to see. But regardless of that, take care of yourselves, take care of your people, take care of your neighbors, you know, be around, be available, be a part of the lives of the people around you. It's important. And it's important to trust yourself and your family. And I think these are philosophies I'm trying to incorporate. So why did I share this story? Well, because I think it's pertinent, and because I think it covers important things that you can't just sit on your hands all the time. It's important to not spin your wheels even with the best intentions, but be actionable, be able to take those steps and make those choices. So yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for being part of the channel. Hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully Yuuya will be able to motivate himself with the rest of us in this new year and see if we can make something interesting happen, and hopefully progress things in a good, positive direction for the program, for the channel, for our lives, and for everything. So yeah, I think even though it's not a great topic, this is about being optimistic. It's about seeking positive change in dark times. It's about hoping in a greater tomorrow than today. So let's cling to that. Thank you so much. And thank you to the patrons and members who support my dream and make it possible for me to make content like this. You're amazing. And until the next video watching me, you'll see me next. I'll see you there.